So just to give you some context or to set the tone for tonight's talk, this is called The End. Now, I wouldn't say this is so much a sermon as it is a reflection. It's a pondering of a journey of the life of one who bears reflecting upon. What can we learn from this sobering review of the life of Judas? Now, I do need to give a fair warning, and I say this in all seriousness. There may be some parts in this sermon regarding violence towards the very end of it that may serve as trigger moments for those who may have gone through troubled times. So I just want you to use your listener discretion, just to be aware of these things and towards the end of the sermon. How? How did I get here? Poised on the edge of a chasm that I cannot see past. This pit from which no one returns. I mean, I'm hanging on to life by this thread. Nothing but darkness ahead and behind. And could it have been different? I remember the first time that the thought ever came to me. The voices, they started when I was but a boy. I remember I was just sitting outside the house, feeding our goat, that wretched, nasty, mean little goat that just had it in for me. And I remember the voices, they said over and over to me, there must be more. There must be more to life. There must be. Over and over. And as I fed that nasty little goat, I just thought to myself, yeah, God, are you talking to me? I thought maybe God had sent his angels to encourage me on my path, the way I might serve God. And these words, there must be more. They seem to intone, yes, well, if that was the case, well, then I would do everything in my power to find that more. That was my destiny. Then let's follow this. And so as I began to grow, I tell you, I studied hard. I studied hard, my best. I studied like nobody's business. And eventually, I even got apprenticed to a local wine merchant named Yakov. And Yakov, I remember him saying to me, one of the primary lessons he just kept drilling into me over and over. He says, if you want to be successful, you must be willing to give everything to be successful, to achieve your goals. Over and over, he would say these things to me. I could never forget that. And Yakov also taught me many, many practical things, like how to handle money, how to keep accounts, how to, think ahead, how to strategize, to make a path for oneself when there seemed to be no path at all around you. And Yakov, he was a bright man. He would tell me, after all, he would say, did not God give us these bright minds from the very beginning, minds with which to think? He said, did God not create us to have dominion, boy? And I thought to myself, his logic, it's very tight. That's irrefutable. He's got a point. God did make us to have dominion. And so I decided then and there to redouble my efforts. I would have dominion like God had intended. I would have this image of God fulfilled, his plan in my life. I would seek this out diligently. And slowly but surely, I became quite successful, really, in my own right. I started a vineyard myself, and I started selling high and buying low. I started seeing the benefits of using one's wisdom to get ahead. And I wasn't doing too bad, after all things considered. It really wasn't. And I can say thanks, be to God. And those voices, they just kept encouraging me forward. There must be more to this life. And so I sought it out. I made more deals. I made more contracts, more connections. I would travel to build my business. And sometimes, sometimes as it happens, yes, there were conflicts at times. But, I would, let's just say I would figure them out. I would figure out one way or another to make the conflict go away. I was willing to sacrifice whatever it took to make things happen, especially my dreams. I was willing to go the distance. As Yakov told me, I would do what it takes to get there to where I was destined to be. This is why, friends, I still remember the day that I saw him. The day that I saw him, everything just seemed to connect. I remember the day well. Anybody who was anybody, everybody who was anybody, they were gathering in this particular little town because this local preacher, he had been gathering, and making a buzz. Everybody had been hearing about him and talking about him, and they were saying you couldn't ignore what he was saying. He was such a preacher, such a person. And so I thought, well, I have to see this for myself. And other people, other priests in the local area, and administrators and rulers and magistrates, we were all kind of gathering around and looking to see who this fellow was. And it came about where we were at this particular house, and people were trying to get in the house, but I tell you, this house was beyond packed. There was no way you couldn't fit another shoe in that house. It was so packed. And so I'd managed just to get to the very edge of the doorway itself. And I was listening intently to what, this fellow was saying. His name was Jesus. And as I was listening, I could hear people kind of murmuring behind me, and it felt like, people were kind of pushing, and we were like, people, don't you realize there's no more room? Don't be pushing here. And after a while, we saw someone out of the corner of my eye. They were going up the side of the stairs to the rooftop, and I didn't pay much attention to it. But shortly thereafter, we realized that someone was actually breaking through the roof right above where this teacher was preaching, and the tiles were falling, and chips were falling, and dust everywhere, and some people in the house were making an uproar. That's my roof you're breaking, And anyways, long story short, it appeared that these couple of guys, they grabbed their friend, who, as they lowered him down on the sheet, you could tell he was as sick as anything. His skin was the pallor of 7-week-old grapes, and it just, his muscles were so emaciated, and you could tell he was just lying there. He looked like the most miserable lump of bare, haggard flesh you've ever seen. And as his friends gently lowered him down right in front of this preacher, apparently the preacher felt quite sorry for him, and he just spoke out of his heart, and he said to him, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." I could just, like I said, I could just barely see from the door, but you could see the guy's face, not his body, but his face. It lit up. It's like he had been waiting for Jesus just to give him that green light, that God might be willing to actually talk to him again, that he wasn't cursed like everyone else around was saying, by God, because the sickness was often attributed to the sin of this world. Of course, as you can imagine, people around, especially the Pharisees, they did not like hearing this. And they started muttering under their breath, "How dare this man say this? How blasphemous this is!" And Jesus, of course, he caught wind of this. And he quickly said, it's like, "People, really?" He says, "Which is it easier to say? Your sins are forgiven you? Or to say to a man who's as sick as this, get up, take up your bed, and walk on out of here?" He says, so that you know that the Son of Man has the authority to forgive sins and heal. I say to you, young man, take up your bed, rise up, walk. Friends, I'm telling it, I'm not lying. I saw it. I remember I saw it with my own eyes. It was impossible, but I saw it. The guy whose muscles had been emaciated like strings on a stick. Suddenly his legs were fleshed out and they were working. He jumped to his feet. He bent over as quick as a child, 6-year-old, and grabbed his mat and just started walking out of there over with on his shoulder. He was dancing with glee. His face was as bright as anything. And everyone's mouth just dropped. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. And all I knew was that this man who had done this Jesus, he had power. He had power like I had never seen. Unbelievable. The power of God was backing this man. And therefore, this man was going to be going places. And of course, the thought struck me immediately, with my help, this man and I could rule the kingdom. I tell you, he had power to heal. Imagine what he could do against the armies of Rome. Oh, incredible. I mean, tell you, as time went by, I came to admire him more and more. I mean, you should have seen his charisma was amazing, unlike any earthly ruler I've ever seen. He would spellbind a room with just simple words, powerful as anything. And his charisma, just even with a look, he could capture people's attention. His presence, it brings light to everyone who's within range. But my biggest problem though, is that he still doesn't get it. I've been hanging out with him. I've been getting closer and closer to him. And yet I've been sharing the vision of what can be. And yet Jesus, I'm trying to show him there's more to this life. There's more to this life than just, being nice to people. Jesus, we have a destiny to manifest here. There's a kingdom to achieve. But he didn't seem to want to listen. I don't know. I remember it wasn't too long after that I tried to help him see, how dedicated I was, how willing I was to give everything to him, to the cause, if you will. I remember I told him, I came up one day and I wanted to cement my position with him. And so I remember saying to him point blank, I will follow you wherever you go. I said it to him, right? I wanted him to know I am serious. I am in this to win this. And then I still remember he did that thing. It's one of those things that really it drove me crazy so often when he would do it. He said something crazy, just off the wall. He looked at me, first of all. He looked at me with sadness in his eye. And he looked at me like as though I had just somehow been like attacked by thieves or something myself. And he said to me, foxes have holes. Birds have nests. But the Son of Man, he has nowhere to lay his head. I gotta say, I was so disappointed in that moment. I was just so disappointed, to hear him say such things. To me, it just betrayed, obviously, a very sorry lack of ambition. But I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to, if there was a future, boy, there would be a future if he would just listen to me. But the perennial problem was that he just wouldn't. He just wouldn't. I'd tell him, Jesus, look, Jesus, you are stabbing yourself in the foot, over and over. By alienating yourselves from the priests and the Pharisees and the scribes, these people, they have influence. Jesus, they have power. Don't you realize, Jesus, they could back you up. They could be powerful allies. I mean, think about it, against Rome, right? They could back you up. We're going to have to make a move sometime. But no, he would just go on, and it's like I didn't say anything. And he just keep on talking about, forgiving people, loving your enemies, yada, yada, yada. I mean, come on, people. Who talks like that? Who thinks like that? We've got to live in this world, don't we? Come on, let's be real here. I mean, yes, there's a place for niceness, but we've got a job to do. It could open up so many doors for us if you just court them. Really would. I kept trying and I kept trying. I was not going to lose this opportunity. I was going to ride this gravy train until the end, friends. Until the end. And I remember I started getting hopeful. I remember he had been planning this journey steadily. We were getting closer to Jerusalem itself. For a long time, we've been in the countryside. He'd been preaching and teaching people. But I was trying to tell him, we need to get to the bigwigs. We need to get to the center. We need to get to where it's happening. We need to talk to people. And finally, he seemed to be taking my advice, and we were heading for Jerusalem. And for whatever reason, one day he seemed to change his mind, and he decided to start riding a donkey into Jerusalem. And people that day, it was the Passover week, and there were crowds everywhere, right? We're talking like hundreds of thousands of people. I remember, yes, I was thinking to myself, yes, this is the moment. Finally, because as people saw him riding the donkey, they're like, hey, isn't that God? That's Jesus, Jesus. And people started shouting and clamoring, and they were throwing their clothes before him. They were grabbing palm leaves and waving them like victory. And I was getting excited because this had to be it. This had to be the moment, finally. I think we're gonna get somewhere. Maybe this time Jesus will actually accept these public accolades. Maybe he'll actually listen to me, and we can move forward on this. And I mean, finally, maybe we can crown him king. He's refused to go for that route for so long, but with all these people in support, everybody watching, come on, it's Jerusalem. There's no way he can miss this opportunity. And so I was trying to get to him, encourage him on, and instead he just kept riding that donkey. And eventually he got to a hill crest, kind of overlooked Jerusalem. I just remember, my heart sank again. He started talking, and he started weeping at the height of this celebration of him being recognized as someone who could do the job. He starts weeping and saying, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I've wanted to bring you together, but you wouldn't have me, and you wouldn't come to me." And I'm thinking, Jesus, look around you. What? It was then it really started to dawn on me. He's really not looking for political support. He's just so intent on his values, niceness, goodness, and I realized, if anything is going to happen with this guy, I'm going to have to make it happen myself. I am going to have to force his hand. Not only will we achieve our goals then, hopefully he'll finally learn some respect for me. He'll see how much he needs me. Shortly after that, I remember we headed on down to Bethany, and we went to one of his dear friends, Martha, Mary, Lazarus. They were always mooning over Jesus, and he seemed to really have this closeness with them, and they'd always make him food, and that was really nice. They were nice people. I give them that. But they weren't anybody special. They were just everyday folk. But I remember this one time that week, I just, here we are trying to build something. And I remember, Mary, again, sweet girl. She has some rough challenges in her past, but she was very devoted. Okay, we'll give her that. She's very devoted to the cause and supporting Jesus. She loved, but she came into the room that day, and I, no one really noticed at first because Mary was always about. But she came into the room that day, and she, was tending to Jesus, as she often did. She'd be right next to him and bringing him food and bringing him drinks and just sitting there listening. And it's all fine. But this day, we were all just chit-chatting about things and the triumphal entry that he'd had, a day or two before. And then suddenly this incredible scent started wafting all around the room. And none of us could figure out where that's coming from. And the scent was incredible. It was one of the highest values of perfume you could possibly smell. And we're looking around and we realize it's Mary. Mary is gone and she's broken a lovely vial of perfume. And as I looked at the size of the vial, I realized that's like a year's worth of wages. She's just dumped on the feet of Jesus. She's washing with her hair, and she seems to have no idea of what she's just done. That amount of money wasted. My heart was sick. Could have helped us in our cause. You know what I'm saying? I spoke up and I just said, seriously, what is up with this? Really? Jesus, can you not say something to her? That's a waste. And I'll never forget. He, the one I've been supporting this whole time, backing this whole, he turns to me. He rebukes me in front of everybody. He's like, leave her alone. She has done the right thing. People are going to be talking about this for ages as the gospel is preached. Leave her alone. You're rebuking me. I didn't say it, but you better believe I was thinking it. And everyone's looking at me as though like, oh, he just got his come up. Oh my goodness, did Jesus just say that? I was, oh my, this time he had gone too far. This woman is nobody. I didn't say it, but I had a plan. I'm like, right, okay, right. You forced my hand. All right, fine. That's it. I was going to make my move. I was going to make my move. If things have been moving much too slowly anyways, as it was. So this is time. It's time to take the bull by the horns. It was time. And so, after we kind of dispersed from there, I ended up making my way back to Jerusalem, meandered through those streets, and I went and I found those priests and the scribes. And I knew, people were talking all the time. There's a buzz. They're looking to get Jesus. Now he's so popular, there's no one going to touch him in public. But, I went to them and I told them, it's like, I've got a plan. They were shocked, of course, and a bit dubious at first. But I told them, look it, I got a plan. He's gotten on my bad side lately, and let's take care of this. You give me some money, and well, I'll give him into your hands. And here's the thing, right? They didn't know I was playing with them. I had a plan. See, I was going to force Jesus's hand. If I could just manipulate him, maneuver him into the place where he'd have to open up, where he'd have to use those powers we'd seen him use before. We'd seen him get out of conflict before, right? They tried to corner him. He'd get out of it every time. Seriously, there's no way I could lose. And plus, I was going to make some money on the side. And they would be happy, and I'd be happy, and eventually, everyone would be happy because we finally get Jesus on the throne. I just now had to figure out when we could find him, set him up for this. Well, a few days went by, and eventually the time for this celebration of the actual Passover came, and I was thinking about this and thinking, we're going to get together, and there's got to be some way we can do this. And I remember, so we went to the place, and Jesus had, figured out this upper room. I don't know who to talk to, but, someone was giving us this upper room, and it was all set up for us. It was wonderful. And so we're all sitting around, we're ready to eat. We're ready to start. But of course, we couldn't, because there was one thing that had been left undone. That one thing, you know what I'm saying? That one thing, the foot washing, right? It was customary. We had to have someone wash the feet. You couldn't eat without having your feet washed. It was a way to relax, a way to set the tone. And of course, somebody forgot to send the servants. So we're all sitting there. Who's going to do it? Now, of course, you better believe it's not going to be me, because, I ain't no servant. Please. There's people in this group that are much lower social status than I, let me tell you. So we'll wait and see what happens. But, I'm getting a little antsy here. I'm hungry, and I just want to get this thing done. So we're waiting, and we're waiting. And each one of us are kind of looking at the other and looking up in the sky and just waiting. And suddenly, we do see someone start moving, like, oh, finally. And I couldn't believe it. Jesus? And he's getting up, and well, maybe he's going to get a drink or something. I don't know. But he got up and he took off his outer robe, and he just got down. He grabbed the towel and the bowl where the servants would normally grab it, and he wrapped it around his waist, and he started pouring water into the basin. And the next thing you know, there he is, washing the disciples' feet, each one of us. In turn, he goes around the circle and he starts washing our feet. And I was, to say the least, stunned. How could this, what is he doing? And as he came around, I was repelled, and I couldn't say anything, but the disgust I felt welling up in my heart. I cannot have this man as my Lord. What kind of king gets down and gets in the dirt and serves people, washes their feet? There is more to this life, and he does not obviously see that. I could not believe it. I could not believe it. Maybe he'll wake up one day to what this was too much. So shortly after he finished washing our feet, he got up and he sat down at the table, and we started the meal, and we were all pretty silent and passing around the food. And then out of the blue, he said it. And I didn't think he was going to say it. I didn't think he knew. But he said those words. He said, I'm telling you guys the truth tonight. One of you is going to betray me. My heart sank within me. I tried to keep really calm, look around as though, what's he talking about? But I thought, is he going to out me now? Is this it? Is the game up? Does he know? Does he know my plan? How does he know my plans? I didn't tell anybody. How does... And everyone, of course, around in the room is all going, Master, is it me? Is it me? And what about, of course I said, oh, is it me? And Jesus looked at me and said, you've said so. You can tell I'm feeling a little pressure there. And of course, this is about the time when Peter, Peter, he's always talking about something, he motions to John, who's leaning against Jesus' breast, and he's like, find out who it is, find out who it is. And this is when Jesus, John says, Jesus, who is it? Jesus says, it's the one to whom I give this piece of bread after I dip it. And Jesus dipped it. He gave it to me. Just like that, huh? You're just going to tell him, you're just going to out me just like that. You don't want me here, do you? Okay, I see how it is. All right. I, you know, as I took that piece of bread, something changed when he handed me that piece of bread. Those voices, they raised to almost like a thunder in my head, and they're just screaming, there must be more to this life. There must be more. Make it happen now. It's now or never. So I just got up. I just got up. I took that piece of bread and I walked out, and it was very dark. It was night. I quickly made my way through the meandering streets of Jerusalem to where I knew I'd be able to find the chief priests and the scribes. And this, I knew, was the prime time to alert them. Because I knew after this meal of Jesus, I knew what he was going to be doing. I knew where he was going to be heading. He'd be heading for that Garden of Gethsemane. It was one of his favorite spots to hang out, to spend time, especially in prayer. I knew for sure he'd be going there. So I went there and they gave me a whole force. There must have been about 100 guys. There were temple guards. I think there were even some Roman soldiers along with us, and funny bedfellows we make when we're plotting against each other, isn't it? And so these guys accompanied me. They had swords, they had clubs, they had torches, and we started making our way. I said, just follow me, follow me. Now, as we were going, we were getting that close to the Garden of Gethsemane. I told them specifically, I said, listen, here's the signal. Whomever I kiss, he's the one. Make sure you grab him tight and arrest him. Don't let him go. Now, I told him that because I was hoping this would do it. I was hoping that when they grabbed Jesus, he would, poof himself out of there. He would make them fall away. He would make them, maybe even slaughter them. I don't know. I didn't really care. The point is, I told them I couldn't be blamed, and then Jesus would be revealed for who he really is. I was hoping. I was just planning for it. And so finally we got there, and I don't know what these guys were doing. It looked like half of them were asleep all over the place. When we got there, I just went up and, Rabbi, good to see you. And I gave him a kiss. And he looked at me again with those eyes. He said, friend, do what you have come for. Do you betray me with a kiss? And immediately, everyone just jumped at him. They grabbed him. They started dragging him away. They tied his hands so roughly, and some of the boys, the Peter and the other guys, they were trying to stop him, but Jesus told them, no. And I was shocked at that because what do you mean, no? And Jesus is like, this is part of the scriptures being fulfilled. And I'm like, what? And suddenly, everyone seemed to lose heart. Every single disciple just bled into the night and disappeared into the shadows. And I was left there alone with this motley crew dragging Jesus away. And he wasn't doing anything about it. I didn't understand. But what Jesus? And so, of course, I follow behind because I thought, well, I've got to see. He's surely going to make his move soon. Time seemed to just fly by, hours. And to say the least, the trial that they started putting him through. Friend, we got to remember, this is midnight. This is like deep in the hours of the night. They put him through this trial. That was an utter sham. It was an utter mockery of a trial. I mean, to me, I was hoping to maybe, yes, instill a little fear in Jesus, but the bungling priests, they couldn't even find two witnesses who could manage to find a common testimony. Seriously. No one could find, and they couldn't see what he had done or not done, or what he had said he was going to do or not going to do, or this is going to happen or that's not going to happen. Everything was all over the place. It was just a mess, and of course, I was just waiting. Even if they do manage to somehow find something on him, which I really didn't think they were going to do anyways, he would get out of it, right? He always had. He was going to get out of it because that's what he does. He always gets out of it. I knew he'd figured out a way out of this. He had to. He had to. But that's where everything started to change. Because I was wrong. I still can't believe how wrong I was about them. How about that? Even as they mocked him, and they did mock him, as they slandered him, and they did slander, they started beating him with their fists and with cups and whatever, the butts of spears, whatever they had handy, and they would have probably torn him apart. You know, all I know is that he never answered them a thing, and he didn't try to avoid any of their trumped up idiotic charges either, and he just stood there. He just kept standing there silent. You know, it was so much like a lamb to the no, no, wait, no, no, Jesus, no, 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 Jesus, no, what are you doing? You can't get out of this. You can get out of this. I pushed past some of the local guards and I just ran. I threw myself at his feet. Jesus, please, I begged you, do something. Free yourself. This was not the way this plan was supposed to go. Don't you understand? This is not the way it's supposed to go. He just looked at me. He said quietly, for this reason, I came to the earth. It, it was at this moment that I realized the voices, the voices had gone silent. They, they were entirely and utterly silent. Suddenly, just like rats leaving an abandoned ship when it's sinking, those voices that had guided my entire life, they had left me on my own. I, they, they left me with this unthinkable, awful truth. I, I have betrayed innocent blood. Innocent, betrayed innocent blood. I immediately got up. I ran to get to the priests. I grabbed the bag from my pocket. I threw it at their feet. The coins scattered everywhere. And I just told them, I said, you must release him. He is innocent. I've betrayed innocent blood. Stop this. And they looked at me with disgust, as though I'd brought this all upon myself. I might have been, well, it's been pleading with stone. And as though this were all my own doing. And I I heard a scream, and I realized it was coming from my own mouth. I have betrayed innocent blood. How? How could I have been so wrong? Everything had been adding up. Surely there was more to this life. I had given everything up to find it. If only he would have listened to me. How could he have not listened to me? Could this really be the end? Surely he must have seen that this was going to happen. But as for me, I have betrayed innocent blood. There's no going back. My wronged master will die today because of me, because of my hands, my bloodied hands. And suddenly, without warning, it seemed emblazoned almost across my mind. I remembered a passage from scripture that I'd learned as a child. I see the words in my head of the prophet Micah. And I hear the words so clearly. And he said, "Hear now, you leaders of Jacob, rulers of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know justice? You who hate good and love evil, who tear off the skin from them and their flesh from their bones, who eat the flesh of my people, strip off the skin from them, smash their bones and chop them up for the pot, and as meat for the cauldron. And then they will cry out to the Lord, but he will not answer them. Instead, he will hide his face from them in that time, because they have practiced evil deeds." And this is what the Lord said concerning the prophets who lead my people astray. When they have something to bite with their teeth, they cry out, "Peace!" But against him who puts nothing in their mouths, they declare holy war. And therefore it will be night for you without vision, darkness for you without divination. The sun will go down on the prophets, and the day will become dark over them. The seers will be put to shame, and the diviners will be ashamed. Indeed, they will all cover their lips, because there is no answer from God. And so now I stand on the edge of this aged tree branch, the rope in place. What else? What else can I do? I have betrayed innocent blood, the only innocent one. And I betrayed him, the promised king of Israel, and all that he ever did. Wretched man that I am, all that he ever did was love. I have betrayed innocent blood, innocent blood. Judas Iscariot was buried the same day as Jesus. He died before Jesus died. The end, indeed. An end with no hope. Perhaps you're thinking to yourself, what kind of way is this to start an Easter weekend? You might be wondering what reason that I've had for sharing such a story. Are there really any benefits to sharing this? I have a reason. I'd like to share it with you now. It's a quotation from a book famously called The Desire of Ages. And this is page 716. And it simply says this: the history of Judas presents the sad ending of a life that might have been honored of God. Had Judas died before his last journey to Jerusalem, he would have been recognized as a man worthy of a place among the 12, and one who would be greatly missed. The abhorrence which has followed him through the centuries would not have existed but for the attributes revealed at the close of his history. But it was for a purpose that his character was laid open to the world. It was to be a warning to all who, like him, should betray sacred trusts. You know, friends, many of us today that are gathered here today, many of us have gathered here today because we're Christians. We call ourselves Christians. We believe we are Christians. We hope we are Christians. We know we have been called to be Christians. And it's important for us to think about this because we too are being called to follow Christ. The question before us today is, are we listening? Are we really listening to what Jesus is saying? Or do we have our own agendas that we're following? Do we have an agenda that actually supersedes that of Christ? Do we have an agenda that actually we're following despite what Jesus is calling us to do? Despite the fact we say we are followers of this chosen one? Is there more to this life? Can there be forgiveness for those of us who have been complicit in the death of the Son of God? These are questions we'll be visiting this weekend, questions we'll be looking for answers for as we read the scriptures, as we hear these testimonies, these stories. These are questions that we need to be wrestling with, friends, not just as a group, but as individuals. You know, we need to contemplate, on this Easter weekend. And I pray that, as we intimately relate this to the cross of Christ, may we learn more of his ways and ultimately learn to submit to him. May God bless you and I to that very end. Amen.
Amen.